Welcome to part B of lesson 4, and in this part I show you how to make your life easy instead of using multiple nested if statements, how to use a single case statement. Now in the previous example, which I've listed here, we had 3 if statements because we needed 4 options. This wasn't too bad, but what if you wanted to have 30 options? Then you will need 29 if statements. Now that may be quite difficult to manage. One if statement in another if statement in another if statement. It could become too tedious to type in and also very, very difficult to read. Apart from being too tedious to type in and difficult to read, if you wanted to fault find and troubleshoot to remove some errors, you would be dealing with spaghetti code. One statement inside another statement inside another statement, and it could get nerve-wracking for you. Fortunately, there's an easier way to nest if statements, and this is called the switch statement. So we're going to rewrite this program from the previous part and then rewrite it using the switch statement. But before I show you how to use the switch statement, let me show you in the form of a flow chart how the switch statement looks. So the switch statement can be viewed as a block. Okay, so if I have a variable, let's call it num a, and we'll give it a value. Let's give it the value 57. Now I want to check whether the number is between 0 and 25. So I would have a case. Let's call that case 0 to 25. So I'll check if the number is between 0 and 25. If the number is between 0 and 25, we will have the first option. We can print out something on the screen. Then we'll have a second case. Is the number between 26 and 49? If that is true, we can have another output. So that's the second option. And we can check if the number is between 50 and 74. We can have a third option. And we can check if the number is between 75 and 100. And we can have a fourth option. We can have multiple cases, as many cases as we want to. These are all the individual if statements. Now we also have something called a default case. What if the number, this program was supposed to check if a number is between 0 and 100, right? It only allows us numbers between 0 and 100. If the numbers were not between 0 and 100, like if we had negative numbers or we had numbers above 100, we could set a default case. So if it didn't meet one of these conditions and the number was outside of the range, we could get it to output something if the number was not within the range. That's called the default case. So let's take an example now, or we'll rewrite the previous example using a switch statement. So here I have a variable called num a, and I'm giving it the value of, let's give it the initial value of 57. Okay. Then you type in switch, and switch is going to check num a. And the switch statement consists of an open bracket and a closed bracket. So this is the body of the switch statement. And within the switch statement, are lots of case statements. Think of these as if statements. So if the number case is between 0 and 25, it will check num A. If the number is between 0 and 25, it will print out this statement. If the number is between 26 and 49, this is the range, it will print out this statement. And if the number is between 50 and 74, print out this statement. And if the number is between 75 and 100, print out this statement. Now, which statement will be printed out? Because the number is 57, and 57 is between 50 and 74, it will then print out this line here. And you'll notice that the last statement is a default. If the number is not within 0 and 100, it will print out the default, which is the number is either negative or greater than 100. So let's test it. Let's put in a negative number, -4, and you see none of these 4 cases will be met. Therefore, the default statement will run, and it will print out the message, the number is negative or greater than 100. Let's put in the number of 200. Okay, here again, the number will go through all of these cases, and you'll notice that none of these cases are true. Therefore, it will default to this statement, and it will give this message that the number is negative or greater than 100, because the number is actually 200. So that's how we build a simple switch statement, which consists of a number of case statements within that switch statement, and each case statement within the switch statement can be considered as an if statement. It does the same job as nested if statements. Now, before I get to a more complicated switch statement, let me take another simple example of 2 concepts that we learned previously. We studied the while loop, and we also studied the if statement. Okay, so I want to combine now the if statement with the while loop, and I also want to explain the statement called the break statement. Now let's have a look. I've defined a variable called num1, and I've put in the value of 10. And I've defined another variable called num2 and put in the initial value of 0. And I've put in a while statement. While num2 is less than equal to num1, print this message, num2, print out the number, which is num2. And I increment num2 by 1. So one would expect that this loop to run 10 times, because the initial value of num2 is 0, and I'm comparing it to num1, which is 10, and I'm incrementing num2 by 1 every time. One would expect this loop to run 10 times as num2 goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, but not so. This loop, if we want this loop to terminate at some point and not go right up to the maximum of 10, we'd like this loop to terminate prematurely and not continue the rest of the statements. We could do something like this. As the num2 is incremented by 1, we could say something like this. If num2 is equal to 5, then break. What break does, it stops any further execution of the loop. It doesn't allow the loop to run from 0 right up to 10 or 10 times. We can get the loop to terminate prematurely, to terminate before its time is due. So this is an example of a while loop and how we could use an if statement to break the execution of a loop, or to terminate it. Now that you know how to combine if statements with while statements and also how to use break, I now want to combine a switch statement with a while loop and an if statement with the break statement. Sounds challenging? I'm sure we can do it. Okay. In this example, I set, think of driving a car. When you start the car, when the car is stationary, its speed is 0 kilometers an hour. And as you press the accelerator, it increases its speed incrementally up to a maximum speed, and then it will give you a warning that you've reached the maximum speed of whatever the maximum speed in that city is. So that's what I'm going to do in this program. I'm going to set car speed at 0 and keep incrementing car speed by 1 until it reaches a speed limit of 75. Okay? And as the car goes through different speeds, so the speed is between 0 and less than 20, I want it to print out this message, and so on. And as it steps through different speed ranges, I'll get it to print out different messages. Okay. Now you'll notice that the loop is going to, one would think that the loop is going to run from 0 to 99 or 99 times. Okay, because we have a while loop here and we are increasing the speed by 1. But if I want this loop to terminate at a certain point, right? At what point? The speed limit is 75, and I would like this loop not to go from 0 right up to 99. I'd like this loop to actually terminate once the speed limit has been reached. So I put in an if statement. If the car speed is greater than the speed limit, to break this loop, and so this loop will actually terminate once the speed limit is reached. Okay, so let's have a look at what the output would be as I accelerate from 0 right up to the speed limit of 75. So if you look on the right hand side in your console, as the speed increases from 1 kilometer an hour to 9 kilometers an hour, it says, sorry, as the speed increases from 1 kilometer per hour right up to 19 kilometers an hour, it's going to give me the message, you are going really slow. And as we move from 20 kilometers right up to 29 kilometers, it's going to type out the message, pick up your pace. From 30 kilometers right up to 39, it's going to say, tap your accelerator. And if we're moving between 40 kilometers and 49 kilometers an hour, it says, hitting your stride. And as we move from move through the range of 50 kilometers an hour to 59, it says moving at a good speed. And from 60 right up to 69, it will give the message, now you're cruising. And as we start traveling from 70 kilometers an hour right up to 75 kilometers an hour, it's going to give us a warning saying you're approaching your speed limit. And as we hit the speed limit of 75 and at 76, as we just exceed the speed limit at 76, it's going to type out this message, you're going too fast, and the loop is then going to terminate and not go up to 99. So this is a good example of how we can combine what we've learned so far, being the if statement, the switch statement, and the while loop. I'm glad you enjoyed this lesson, which is lesson 4. that dealt with if statements and switch statements. And when we get back, we'll deal with a very core part of Swift, which I call the powerhouse or the workhorse of Swift, and these are called functions.